Come on in, welcome. Good to see everybody this morning. Hello. Hello, good to see everybody. We'll go ahead and get started. It's right at 11. I'm John Lee with St. Louis Real Estate Investors Association, and we're here with our weekly update with Kathie Davis of Davis Travaglini LLC, and got all kinds of exciting news today. I think starting off with your grandbaby.
Yes. Yes. Chris Bosler, as many of you know, is my son-in-law, and he and my daughter Bonnie had a little girl this morning, Lila Catherine, 6 pounds, 12 ounces, 20 inches long. Everybody's doing good. She's very cute. And I have their older son, their older child, my grandson Max, works at the office. uh, he's on the computer now, so he might last for a while. So that's my big news. I don't think much has changed in any of our counties since last week. St. Louis County, which is our big problem child, is still at phase 0. The judge is talking about going to phase 1 February 1st, but I'm afraid to rely on anything. And you'll recall that they don't want to let the sheriffs do evictions again until they're at phase 2. So we're a little bit of a ways away from that. The city has a new presiding judge. He continued the partial eviction stay until the end of January. I haven't personally talked to him, but a friend of mine has, and we think that he's going to be inclined to not keep that stay for a long time. However, we now have a new federal government stay, or we think we do. We haven't actually seen an actual order from this. The new president asked the CDC to extend their prior stay. And if they do that, it will be the same terms as before, where they have to do the declaration and it's only good for rent cases. The other 441s and lawful detainers and everything, it won't work for that. And at first we'd heard they were trying to get it to go till the end of September. And since then we've heard it's going to go through March. With that comes another large quantity of federal rent relief funds. And I know that some of you got some rent relief funds the last go round for tenants who weren't paying. I know from, usually I only hear the bad stories, right? Because people don't call me if it's working as it's supposed to. But I know that we had to really jump through some hoops on for some of our clients on these cases to get money. We had relatively good luck with Arch City Defenders. Better Family Life kind of ghosted us after we had worked really hard on a few cases and we never heard from them again. And other agencies were kind of in between that. I'm getting the excuse, oh, they were overwhelmed. Well, some of them were making us jump through hoops or asking for documents that were just ridiculous. I've been extended kind of an invitation to be part of a group that's going to talk to the county next week about terms and conditions for the new rent relief program. And I have a list of things I would like them to do. Foremost on that list is to allow the landlords to apply and to allow a court judgment determining an amount of rent that's due be prima facie evidence that that rent is due without requiring a lot of additional stuff and without requiring cooperation from the tenants. I think that with respect to my clients and the people that I know, the landlords were willing to cooperate to get this assistance money. They either were asked to do deals that were just very crazy and gave up too much, or the tenants wouldn't follow through and get the money. And the worst cases that we have, the absolute worst ones, the pre-pandemic ones, are tenants who are basically saying, yeah, we're not going to pay until the sheriff comes, and we're not going to move until the sheriff comes. And they're refusing to even, bestill themselves to apply for any rental assistance. And those cases, of course, are horrible. And since right now the landlords can't apply, that puts them in a bind. That state program through MHDC that allows the landlords to apply also has terms and conditions that most of our landlords are not interested in, as far as agreeing not to file another suit for 4 more months, taking big discounts on the rent, et cetera, et cetera. So some people might be doing that program, and if they're doing it and it's working well, I'm happy for them. But a lot of our landlords were not interested when they heard what the terms were. So we're hoping, within the next week or two to have more information about how that process is going to work. We are continuing to tell tenants when we are in virtual court with them to call 211 or go on the website for the county or the city, and there's links to resources where they can apply. Yesterday, I got told by several tenants that they were trying to apply and they'd been told they were out of funds and that kind of thing. Well, new funds are coming. So I've been telling them to keep calling, and you should tell your tenants that too. And if we can get an agreement from the county that the landlords can apply and that we can use the judgment as proof that that there's a landlord tenant relationship and that the rent is owing, I will let you guys know right away. And I think that would be huge for us. I'm not sure how many of you have tenants that are really, really hosing you over, but by next Friday, if I know how that's going to work, I'll tell you, and hopefully I'll have information about how you can go about applying for that. If we get that, I don't know if we'll get it. I was on a call with Lisa Clancy and some other people a few weeks ago, and she was kind of like, oh, I guess, because I was saying some of these tenants just won't apply for the aid and the landlord can't do it. And she goes, well, I guess for some of them, it's just too much to do that. Well, of course it is. They could live for free. The sheriff's not coming out. So why should they have to fill out paperwork? I mean, that's like a job, which they don't have, or they're refusing to do. So, this is just between us, right? So I don't think she was impressed with my attitude, but she has her own problems. But I felt like I made the point that the landlord should be able to apply for this aid because we're the ones who are having to stay our legal rights. Another piece of news that we have is that we're working really hard on the takings lawsuit. After a lot of research done in our office and by another attorney I know, a guy named John Hine, we've concluded that the lawsuits that are trying to get these stays lifted all over the country are losing. The courts seem to pretty much agree that the federal government can stay evictions if they want to. However, we think the loophole is that is a taking. That's a taking of your property, even if it's not permanent. And it's well settled law that constitutionally, if the government takes your property, you have to be compensated. So we're going to try this loophole lawsuit, and we're trying to see if we can find grounds to get it certified as a class action, so it will act on behalf of everybody who got an eviction judgment and wasn't allowed to execute. That the government compensate the landlords for the money they weren't able to get. So we're working hard on that. We appreciate everybody's support on that. And it's something that is not really, it's not going to help us if we file it fast because I think we've pretty much abandoned the idea of lifting the eviction stays because that's just seems to be a non-starter everywhere. So yeah, takings, that's like eminent domain. The government can come and take your yard for Highway 40, right? Like they did to my parents, but they have to pay you. In the case of my parents, they had to pay my parents a lot of money, and I was the favorite child for about 2 months until my brother took my dad to the Super Bowl. So, you rise and fall in the standings, right? So let me look at the chat to see if I've missed anything. Wondered about takings. Okay. Does anybody have any questions or comments today?
Well, Dwayne asked probably the same question I was going to ask. Is there anything more we can do? I mean, obviously donations will go a long way, but is there anything we can do too to maybe write to somebody or do anything in our favor or your favor?
Well, I don't think it hurts to write to the presiding judge in St. Louis County if you're having pain and say, here's what's going on in my case and not being able to evict. But we really do appreciate the donations. We may need money in the future, but we don't right now. So right now we're good. So don't worry about that. We have enough money to continue the research and drafting of the pleadings on this lawsuit and get it filed. But we'll let you know if that if that runs out. The problem with research is it's like surfing the internet. You can just burn a ton of time.
Mhm.
But the attorneys who are working on it, including myself and John Hine, are not billing for every hour we spend. Some of it, is because we're law geeks. It's kind of entertaining to us to read all these cases.
Mhm.
Um, and it's very interesting to see across the country, the judges coming down in favor of the government being able to enact restrictions and shut things down.
Mhm.
We agree with some of it. We don't agree with some of it, but um,
Okay.
that's one of the powers that apparently everyone views the government as having.
Mhm.
What else have we got? The only reason my tenant left is because his utilities were turned off. I know, that's interesting. And I have one case. I have probably it's probably the worst case I have, where the utilities were turned off and the tenant stayed and didn't get out. And my client understandably was reluctant to turn the utilities back on, but then you kind of have to weigh the potential to incredible damage to your property.
Mhm.
That tenant, I think, although they have refused to apply for any rental assistance, they got a social worker to get their utilities turned back on, so at least the pipes aren't freezing and that kind of thing. But I think for most tenants, they're trying to get through this. They're trying to pay their bills. They don't want to be evicted, all that kind of thing. But there is that group that will take advantage. Anytime there's an advantage for them, they will take advantage. If they can stay for free, they will take advantage. If they can get their utilities for free, they will take advantage. Have I seen any difference between assisted voucher tenants and non-tenants? Here's what I would say about the voucher tenants, the Section 8s and that kind of thing. I think for most of those landlords, they're at least getting a chunk of the rent through the government assistance because that's not stopping. So maybe they are not complaining to me as much as some of my landlords of unsubsidized tenants because they're actually seeing some money coming in. And maybe in some cases, the person, if they lose whatever employment they have, they can get recertified and, a bigger chunk of the rent is being paid. So we are not seeing complaints on that. With respect to just in general evicting them, it can be more difficult to evict a Section 8 tenant for a lot of reasons. But during the pandemic, they might be better tenants because they might be, getting that subsidy. The landlord's getting that subsidy. Let's see. We're from the government and we're here to help. Yeah. Well, I'm not a total anti-government person. I'm not going to storm the Capitol or anything like that. I do believe there are things that government does that are good. I believe strongly in the court system in which I've spent my whole life. Not that it's right all the time, but that people generally try to get it right. And it's a reasonably fair way to try to resolve disputes. And that's, of course, run by the government. But there are times when, I'll tell you the thing that really bugs me. And even though I'm a fairly liberal person and I did vote um, for the current president this election, I can tell you that the regulatory environment of discrimination complaints makes me crazy. And I feel like good landlords get these discrimination complaints. I hope it never happens to you, but it ends up with an immense ton of paperwork, a huge cost to the landlord, even if they've done nothing wrong, and they drag on forever. I mean, I think it's just a horrible situation. There seems to be no way for the HUD representatives to screen the complaint in advance and decide, oh no, this is not going anywhere. We're not going to investigate it. They do the investigation first, no matter what. It's almost always resolved in favor of the landlord. And some of the complaints are ludicrous, but the paperwork and the interviews and the stuff you have to go through is crazy. So when I run into people who are unhappy with the government and the regulatory environment, I think of that. And I think, yeah, they're right in that case. There should be a better way to do that. I'm not in favor of discrimination, but most of these have nothing to do with discrimination. It has to do with somebody who's bringing forth an excuse about why they don't pay or why they don't comply with lease terms.
Mhm.
I inquired with the insurance company whether we had options for business losses. Insurance companies are fighting all claims with respect to the restaurant industry, many insurance companies added virus exceptions after SARS. Yeah, that's not really my area. That that insurance stuff. Uh, I guess if somebody wanted a specific referral on something like that, I would figure out a lawyer I could send you to. I know that we had a thing here at my office a couple of years ago. It was kind of a crazy thing. The lightning struck our electric meter. And because we had 2 meters in our building, it was like the power started flickering. We didn't catch on to the fact at first that half of our electric supply had been taken out. And after several hours, we finally figured it out, and we went to look at the meter, and it had this burn hole in it, in the glass. I mean, it was kind of stunning, but we were able to get great electrician, Reinhold Electric. I was very happy with them. I'm happy to give that recommendation. We were able to get them to come out and hook up a generator and fix it. It took a couple of days. Ameren had to come out a couple of times, and we had to wait for them. We even had the fire department here at one point because there was such a bad burning smell.
Mm.
They were very nice, and they were very interested in the whole lightning strike thing. I sent them pictures. Anyway, when I spoke to our insurance company, they were it was Hartford, and they were very good about reimbursing us for our costs and, that kind of thing. And apparently we had business interruption insurance for that kind of thing, but the documentation I would have had to provide was so extensive. And we kind of felt like we don't even really know if we lost any business because we were still here. We were still answering the phones. We were still emailing with people. I mean, it's not like we got to stop working. We just didn't have air conditioning and lights,
Mm-hmm.
So we ended up not making that claim. So that's my whole experience with business interruption
Mm-hmm.
insurance. I'm sorry to tell you, I know nothing more.
Kathie,
Yeah.
I had spoke with my agent about the business interruption insurance, and she said she had 3 people submit claims, and the insurance companies denied them because they said you can't have interruption if the tenants are there and they're not paying you. That's a civil matter that you have to take up through the courts. But if the building had burned down or something and they were paying you up to that time, then they would have paid, is what my agent told me in those cases. Because I asked her that question, and I also asked her about, well, what if, like in my case, I've got buildings that I'm not renting just because I'm afraid to get caught in a position, you get a payment, even though you screen them. They move in and they don't decide to not pay you till September. I don't want to take that hit. And she said you can get insurance for the empty buildings, but she told me the cost was astronomical. She said just put an alarm system on and hope for the best. But that's what she told me on the insurance. She had submitted them, but they were denied.
Well, let me talk real quickly about a couple of lease clauses we'd like to see you have. And one of them is requiring tenant insurance. I have a landlord who consulted me recently about an accident that happened to the building that was not the landlord's fault. And the building got condemned for occupancy due to structural problems by the city. And one of the things that I think is going to help this landlord is that they had a requirement in the lease that the tenant have tenant insurance, renter's insurance. And I don't think they're going to have any liability anyway to the tenants, but I think that's really going to be, well, tenant, you should have renter's insurance that protects you in the event something like this happens and protects your property and, pays for temporary housing and, that kind of thing. So we really like to see you have renter's insurance clauses in your leases. Even if the tenants don't get them, the fact that they promised they would get it could help you a lot in some situations. And then the other thing is, we've talked about this a couple times before, I think, but I really want you to be extra careful in screening. And it's going to be an interesting environment, I think, because you may have more tenants than usual who had a temporary bad credit situation because of the pandemic. And you're going to have to figure out what your criteria are for forgiving them one lapse and, that kind of thing. But the ones I would be really worried about are the ones who are going to try to fraud you or conceal their prior eviction or that kind of thing. So definitely check on CaseNet. That's a very helpful device. But I think you should assume that there's a possibility that tenants have gotten their cases hidden by security levels on CaseNet. And so you should be contacting landlords directly or going back a landlord or two while we get through this environment. My feeling about screening is it's kind of like musical chairs. There's going to be one landlord who's going to be left holding the bad tenant when the when the music stops, as you're racing around from chair to chair. The people will get more and more clever about how to hide bad credit, false social security numbers, using their cousin's name, having somebody stand by the phone and pretend to verify their employment, that kind of thing. So just be extra cautious as we get through this environment. I do believe that we're coming toward the end of the pandemic, that we're seeing the proverbial light at the end of the tunnel, that we'll be back to where we can evict people like normal. You can rent to people, that kind of thing within a few months. But there are going to be people who are going to be desperate to find housing, and they are going to be trying to hose you. So don't be the loser at musical tenant chairs. Okay. I got another question here, I think. Hang on. How do you ensure tenant insurance remains in force? You could ask to be named as a co-insured. You could require them to provide proof on every lease insurance, lease renewal. But frankly, there's not a perfect way to do that. But the fact that you require them to have it in the lease, if they don't have it, that's on them, not you. The fact that they're not covered for certain things, that shifts the burden, as we say to them. Okay, guys.
Yeah, that's a good point. Being on there as an additional insured, I've done that several times, and I continue to do that. And I also get notices when the billings come up, the billing notices, and make sure it's paid. I've actually had insurance companies, State Farm and some others, send me notices when they didn't pay on time. And then that was an additional source and more documentation. Mine never came to lawsuits or problems, but that's just the way, I've kind of protected it a little bit. I think, it's a little bit more trouble, but it's not that much more trouble to make sure they have insurance, because it's really not very much money for them.
Yeah.
At all. And you could put that in your rent if you really want to. You could just, like the sewer bills, you can just increase it and you could control it even though it's their insurance.
Yeah. I've seen some leases where the landlord has the right to force place the insurance or pay for the insurance if they get a default from the tenant.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think it's good to have it in the lease, even if they are not complying.
Mm-hmm.
I like to see those clauses.
Mm-hmm.
I think I have another question.
Mm-hmm.
Dwayne has put something in the chat, a name and phone number of a screener.
Yes.
Yeah.
Carla is a screener. Yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah. So I would definitely jot that information down. I know Dwayne is a very experienced and smart landlord. And so if he's using someone happily, they're probably good.
Yes.
I can tell you that he uses me, right?
Yeah. We went against her recommendation twice and lost. And every time we stick with her, we've had real good results.
Mm-hmm.
I think you use her too, didn't you, John?
Yes, be very efficient, very good, very quick. I mean, just and you can trust the information. She goes into it unemotionally. You get the real facts.
She used to be a PI also, so that probably helps.
It probably does.
Well, that's really what you need.
Mm-hmm.
And, for things like discrimination complaints and that kind of thing, that's what you need. Just the facts, ma'am. You want someone who will just base their decision based on the data.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Well, I have to go get my grandson lunch.
Okay. Well,
so I will talk to you guys next week.
Thank you so much, Kathie. Congratulations on your new grandbaby.
Thank you.
Have fun with Max this weekend and then get some rest.
I will. Yeah, I will. I'm looking forward to playing with him, and I'm looking forward to when he goes back home. Okay.
Thanks a million, Kathie.
Thanks again. We